Welcome everyone to my walkthrough of Golden Sun. I'm going to be playing through the original game, and I'm going to be doing a sort of a challenge run for this walkthrough. It's going to be a no Djinn, no summon challenge. So I'm going to be focusing mostly on the various equipment that you should use and the various synergy you should be using for each of the tactical challenges in the game, the bosses, the dungeons. I'm not going to be this is not going to be like a complete 100% walkthrough. I'm not going to be telling you exactly where you need to go. I think the game is pretty. It's not too difficult to figure out where you need to go at any given time, and you do have a lot of leeway of the order of how you need to encounter certain events. And for the dungeons, there's some really fun puzzles in it. And I think part of the fun of the game is figuring out those puzzles yourself. So if you're really coming back to Golden Sun, this is a pretty old game. It's a game I loved playing as a child, which is why I'm going back and playing it right now. And you haven't experienced the challenges, I would recommend doing it yourself. If you're having trouble with one of the puzzles or something and you want some help, feel free to leave a comment and I'll let you know, or there are plenty of walkthroughs on the internet that are going to help with that. I haven't seen any specific like walkthroughs on like GameFAQs or even on YouTube or like Reddit about this type of run. I did do a little bit of research. I do think it is possible, just from my own understanding of the game and from reading various forums. This game isn't overly difficult, and I do think I'll be able to beat it and even beat the super bosses. So those might be a little difficult without summons. But we'll see. So this is just going to be my tips on what I think is the best method to go about doing this. And just to be clear, I'm not going to be, I'm still going to be picking up the Djinn, but they're just going to be on my characters at all times. Set, I think it's called. So I will be changing the classes to get the different synergies, but I will not be using the Djinns in battle. And they'll never be unset to be ready to summon. It's only going to be using attacks and I guess items and synergy. What else? So I'm also not going to be going over like where to pick up every item. I might mention like, hey, you might want to. There is this particular item you might want to go get, but I'm not going to be doing like an exact walkthrough of where you get the item unless it's super important to the build, I guess. Or if I think it's super important to the build, then I'll make more of a note. So be wary of that too. It's more of just like a strategy guide as I play through, and I just come up with, hey, this is what worked for me. So yeah, let's move on to the game. Okay, so for the beginning of the game, it's a fairly linear path that you're going to be following. You're just kind of going from scene to scene, watching characters interact with each other. You do kind of have the ability to sometimes chime in with either a yes or a no. For the most part, this doesn't matter too much. The characters will kind of react based off of what you say. So feel free to roleplay with it. That could be kind of fun, and it does lead to some fairly entertaining dialogue, which you might want to do. But yeah, just kind of follow where the NPCs kind of guide you throughout this part. You will have four, I guess technically five different scripted encounters that you'll fight in this section. For the most part, you can't really do anything other than fight. You might be able to flee, but just attack through them. All the enemies go down to one or like two attacks or a critical hit. And even if you miss a couple times, it's not going to be that big of a deal. I would recommend not using your herbs if you can. That money is going to be useful, especially early in the game, that you get for selling them. And you really shouldn't need to use them. You shouldn't be taking that much damage just attacking through them. Eventually, you'll get to a point where you're now in, I guess, modern time. You'll have a short time jump, and after another scene, you'll finally get a hold of your party. So I'll quickly kind of go over your party. Isaac is the main character. He doesn't have really that much of a personality, especially in this game, but he's kind of who you as the player are role-playing. He's probably, arguably, the best fighter you're going to get. He has very good attack and pretty good agility, which are kind of some of the most important stats. And I think he has also fairly good PP, if I remember correctly. The second character getting is Garrett. I like him as a character. I think he has kind of the most personality, but he's probably the weakest character of your party because he's very slow and he's not very strong. He's tough, but at the end of the day in this game, having better attacking power tends to be more defensively beneficial than I guess just strong defense and HP levels. But I mean, you can will be working on that. But that's something to consider. And then finally, you'll have Jenna. She's kind of the Princess Peach of this game. She, as you've probably seen, and you probably will see, she's kind of a dick, especially to Garrett. But she's probably your strongest character in the beginning, and she's going to be carrying you through most of the fights. You could beat him simply enough by just attacking, but she is probably the most efficient fighter because she does have the highest agility and she has a strong spell to start out with. So one of the first things I like doing is moving Jenna to the first position. Party order in this game I don't think matters for like your enemy's attack selection. I think in other games, like people in a higher position might get attacked more frequently, but I don't think that's implemented in this game. So the only really thing that matters with party order is area effect attacks. So you might want to consider having if you were really power building it or something, or if maybe later we come up with a harder fight, I'll put the bulkier characters, Isaac and Garrett, in the middle. But for the most part, I kind of just prefer putting them all in agility order because it's just convenient for me. Next, you're going to want to register your move skill. You can either register Isaac or Garrett's move skill. Probably Garrett is the better option to do at this point, but it doesn't actually really matter. You're not going to be using it that much in this beginning section, and PP is not going to be a big deal. It doesn't cost. I think it costs like 2 PP to use it, and you're not using it enough that it's going to drain your resources too badly. But I usually register that to L. With that out of the way, we can move on to the strategy guide for the first dungeon area, or the first section of the game. This first section, because you don't have access to any Djinn, you're stuck in your base classes with your base synergy. You don't really have any options for leveling. It's going to be pretty much the same as you would in a regular playthrough, a non-challenge playthrough. My first recommendation would be to pick up all the items you can find throughout town and sell pretty much everything you have. that you're not going to want, to buy the best equipment that you can with the money that you have. That's just going to give Isaac the attack power that he needs to two-shot most of the monsters in the next dungeon, and it will give all your characters some defense that should mitigate any of the damage that is able to get to your party, and hopefully keep you from wiping. For a guide on where you can find all the relevant items that you're going to need for selling, you're going to want to start with Isaac's neighbor. You can find 6 coins in his house. Then you can make your way around town talking to people as you wish. But eventually you're heading to Kraden's house, and at Kraden's house you'll find an elixir outside of his house and 5 coins inside of his house. Next, in the same screen area where Isaac's house is located, one of the houses to the south, where a lot of the events of the prologue happened, there is Jenna's house is down there, and you can find an antidote in her house. Next, you want to continue south and to the east, and you'll get to the second screen of the Vale Village area. In the topmost house, you can find 3 coins in one of the barrels inside the house. As you continue down south, you'll find the house right before you go down the steps to the lower plaza. You'll find a smoke bomb inside there. Down in the lower plaza, next to the store, you'll find the blacksmith's house, and there's a herb inside the house there. And finally, you can find 1 coin on the second story at the end. From there, you'll want to stop by the blacksmith's shop, or not the blacksmith, the store, to buy the required items that you're going to want before the next dungeon. You'll want to start off by moving or giving Isaac's short sword to Jenna, and selling Jenna's wooden stick, along with all the items, the non-equipped items that you picked up along the way. For weapons, you're going to want to buy a longsword for Isaac. For armor, buy the best armor you can get for all 3 characters, which should be a travel vest for all 3, a leather cap for all 3, and a wooden shield for Garrett and Isaac. The game will ask if you want to sell what's already equipped. Yes, you're definitely going to want to sell it. If you were able to do everything right, you should have 5 coins remaining at the end of all your purchases, and pretty much everybody is fully upgraded as they possibly can be, besides for Garrett. But that won't be that big of a deal because he's going to be too slow to really attack. If for some reason you made a mistake during the purchasing, which I have done in the past, you might be given a game ticket. You can sell that, or you can even sell Jenna's weapon. She's probably not going to be needing it. If you make a mistake and don't have enough money to purchase the longsword. Really, the most important thing is the longsword for Isaac. Okay, now you're ready to head up to Soul Sanctum, the first dungeon of the game. Right now, because you don't have any Djinn available, all your characters are going to be in their base classes. Of note, both Isaac and Garrett have move. Isaac also has retreat, but you probably shouldn't need to use that. That will just take you back to the beginning of the dungeon. And he also has cure. Jenna and Garrett have Flare, which is the attack that you're going to be using for the most part throughout this dungeon whenever there's more than one enemy. And at level 2, Izak is going to learn Quake. I recommend that by the end of this dungeon you have all your characters, or I guess at least Izak and Garrett, at level 2. It's depending on how long it takes you to solve the puzzles, you might hit level 3. I think I did on one of my playthroughs, but most of the time I'll just hit level 2 just from battling the random encounters. You know you're towards the end of the dungeon when you reach the sunroom. From there on, you're not going to have any more random encounters. The last thing I want to note about your party is that Izak is probably going to level up first, unless you get a lot of experience in one battle. And when he does level up to 2, he will have a higher agility than Jenna. So you might want to move him into first position to reflect that. But as soon as Jenna reaches the second level, she'll have higher agility again, so switch her back. So there are 5 different enemies that you can encounter in this dungeon. The Amaze is probably the most difficult, but I tend to only see that later in the dungeon once you're getting closer to the end. If you just, as I said before, if you just encounter one enemy, it's quicker just to attack through them. Unless it's an Amaze, then you'll still want to use your synergy. Both Flare and Quake synergy have area of effects. The center hits the most damage, and the outside area of effect does a little bit less damage. Both Jenna and Izak, especially when Izak hits level 2, I think outspeed all of the various opponents, so you could just know in your mind that you're not going to get hit back if you're able to wipe them out with just Jenna and Izak. At level 1, Garrett only, I think he speeds ties with the Vermin, but at level 2 he'll beat both the Slime and the Vermin. For the most part, you're just going to want to start the battles by casting a Flare with Jenna, and then targeting anybody who is next to the main target in the area effect with Izak and Garrett. Except for the Amaze, if you encounter multiple of them, the Flare won't kill them in one shot. You're going to want to both use Jenna's Flare and also follow up with either Garrett or Izak's physical attack to knock them out. Besides for that, most of the enemies will fall to 2 strikes except for the Amaze. The AoEs, as I mentioned, aren't as strong, but every now and then Jenna's Flare, like AoE effect, will kill a bat or a wild mushroom. You won't have to worry about PP for Jenna. The encounter rate isn't too high, and she'll pretty much regenerate all her synergy between battles. You should only really need to use 1 Flare per battle. If you do take a couple attacks, either because of a miss or something, Izak has Cure, so feel free to use that. He'll be using his Quake on some of the battles just because there's multiple enemies, like 5 or so. You'll probably want to use Quake. But for the most part, he's not using his PP nearly as often, so the drain that you'll get from Cure isn't that big of a deal. And with that, you pretty much there's no boss in this dungeon, so you pretty much, with those strategies, you should have no problems facing all the monsters in the dungeon and solving all the puzzles. So enjoy the scenes, enjoy the story, and after this dungeon you'll be back in Vale.